Welcome to the very first episode of Compassionate Serenity, where we look into wellness, self-care, and the art of living with intention. I'm thrilled to partner with Sheena Chowder, a psychotherapist and previous guest from Serenity Speaks. In this, our very first episode, as we settle into a new year, we'll explore how to set resolutions with compassion, create achievable goals, and avoid the guilt that often sneaks in. Plus, we'll share practical self-care strategies rooted in CBT to help you navigate 2025 with clarity and confidence. So let's get started. Hi Sheena, how are you?
Hi Cleo, I'm well, thank you. And yourself?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year
I'm good.
to you too.
Superb. And here we are, 2025, a whole new year ahead, and really looking forward to it. And one of the things that I thought we could, talk about today, and I know we were having a chat before, was the obvious thing is this is the time of year where people set their New Year's resolutions. Um, and it's almost like the time of year that a lot of resolutions are broken,
Absolutely. Yeah.
for one reason and another.
Mm.
Yeah. I remember this because I used to smoke. I used to be a smoker, and every year I'd say,
Yes.
like, New Year's, I'm going to give up smoking, and that'll be
Yeah.
it. So I was usually out in a nightclub or something, and the music's pumping, you're having a drink, it's a wild time, Happy New Year. And the first thing, and this was back in the day when you could smoke in clubs, as I have that drink, I would light the cigarette without even thinking. It's like I forgot what I've set myself up for. So I
Mm.
used to feel like I've had that cigarette after 12 o'clock. I've
Mm.
already messed up my resolution, so there's no point. It's like giving up straight away.
Definitely. And how
Yeah.
did you feel then when you did that? When you said, it felt like I was just giving up. What was that? What was that like?
I used to feel disappointed, and then I think to myself, well, I can do it again. But for that night,
Mm.
because I was
Mm.
out, I think, well, skip tonight, we'll start tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow I wouldn't be able to, have a clear day of non-smoking. So I kept doing that, and then probably by mid-January, I've totally given up. Forget that, you know.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
used to be really frustrating. Yeah,
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it, isn't it? Sometimes when we set ourselves these things that we want to kind of achieve, we will often say, I'll do
hmm
it tomorrow, I'll do it the next day, I'll wait till a Monday. I'll wait till Monday is a really common one, isn't it? Wait till the start of the week
yeah, yeah,
to do it. But
yeah.
yeah.
Well, what do you think that is? That like? Is there something about that, like the new year, new week, new day? Is there something like within us that's why we do that? Like,
Yeah, I think sometimes it's kind of, we hear that a lot, don't we? Especially at the start of the year or
mm,
even before January, you see, all the kind of like memes and stuff, new year, new me, all of that. And
yeah,
you're kind of thinking, okay, how realistic is this? Have you thought
mm,
about what you're going to be actually doing and the time that it might take? It's funny because even friends have said to me, "What are your New Year's resolutions?" And I said, I don't do New Year's resolutions. I'll set my goals how I would,
mm,
normally set my goals. Um,
yeah,
because sometimes there's something about kind of, we'll set these unrealistic expectations and we won't achieve the goals that we set out to achieve.
mm,
We'll then feel a sense of failure. And it's not that we
mm,
but it's that we just haven't set those goals in a healthy way.
right, right, okay, that's interesting. Because just as you were speaking there as well, so there's many trains of thought, but just something that came to mind then was I've heard that saying, when they're saying, like, the optimist would say, um, aim for don't aim for the universe, because if you don't reach the universe and you get to the stars, at
Yeah,
least you're up there, kind of thing.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
the people who the
Mm,
train of thought that say don't
mm,
actually aim, because then you won't be disappointed.
Mm,
Just kind of get along with it. And I suppose it is an amalgamation of both of those things. Like, be aware that,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think very much that's a really helpful way of thinking about it, isn't it? It's like sometimes we'll have this
Mm,
black or white way of thinking, and we don't really see the grey area. We don't see, well, actually, there's this bit in the
mm,
middle. What are we acknowledging that bit in the middle? Because we all have different circumstances. We all have different things that are happening in
yeah,
the environment. When we're thinking about kind of any goals that we're setting or resolutions, whatever you want to call them, there's lots of things we need to consider. Are other people a part of that? You know, um, do I have to prepare for this? What is it that I need to do? But there's all of that as well that comes
yeah,
into it. And perhaps, it's great to be optimistic, absolutely. But I guess
mhm,
something about having kind of realistic optimism in
yeah, yeah,
line with our own beliefs as well. And because often say if somebody has that belief about themselves. We were talking about belief in our last episode, weren't we? We were talking about kind of core beliefs.
yes,
Yeah, and I
mhm,
suppose some of this relates back to that. So say if somebody has a belief of perhaps not being good enough, if they then
mhm,
themselves, right, okay, I haven't exercised, for 6 months, but I'm gonna go to the gym 5 times a week, from the start of January.
yeah,
You're thinking, is that realistic? Because if you haven't done it for some time, is it realistic? How are you going to feel if you don't achieve that? So perhaps there's something maybe about smart goal setting,
yeah,
setting
yeah.
goals in a smart way.
Gosh, yeah. There's something in marketing that they
Mhm.
say, so SMART. So it's an acronym, is it? Do you know the one? So
Absolutely,
it's like, yeah. So maybe that works on a personal level as well. To
very much so.
Yeah. Oh, so you would say that's a good way of setting you. Okay, brilliant. I'm going to put that in the show notes as well
Definitely.
for people to.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
please do. I think that'll be really helpful for everybody. I mean, I certainly use it with my clients, in therapy, more so CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mm,
so because it's about kind of setting goals around, okay, you come in with this difficulty.
hmm.
What is it that you want to achieve? How are we going to achieve this in a smart way? So that is, being specific about what it is that you want to achieve, being really kind of specific about it. Then the measurable part,
Yeah.
we're going to measure this, is it
Mhm.
achievable? Is it realistic and is it time based? So I think, yeah, it would be great to share that with people. So
That, that,
think about that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I'll drop that in because, yeah, I was just as you were talking, I was thinking those are like the smart steps, and it helps you to be accountable, I suppose. So if you
Yeah.
journal that or pop that in a diary, and you
Mm,
set out those goals,
mm.
yeah, I'll definitely pop something for people to have a look at and be able to kind of move into the new year with that. So because what my understanding is, I suppose, is that when we feel like the experience I've told you about there to try to stop smoking is,
Yeah.
um, I saw it as a failure,
Mm,
and instead of
mm,
saying, well, actually,
mm,
um, let's do this
mm.
gradually, for example,
Yeah,
and it's definitely achievable, but let's do it gradually in these steps. And what happens if if you put down how you'll feel if you don't achieve your goal,
that's right.
and
Yeah.
then think about how that feels and what can you do to counteract it. So for example, oh well,
Mm,
I had 2 clear days of non-smoking, for example,
yeah.
and the third day I had a cigarette.
Yeah.
Think about how you'll feel and think about what you can do to combat that and move past it, rather than thinking, oh well, give up because it's not working, you
That
know.
sounds so helpful. It's like the eat the whole packet of biscuits thing, isn't it? Often people will say, I can't just eat one biscuit. I need to eat the whole packet. Do you? Or you just say you don't need to eat the whole packet. You're choosing to eat the whole packet. But I think that that's a
Yeah.
really healthy approach. What you're saying there is like, you're reflecting on it, aren't you? And there's
Yeah.
maybe something about kindness as well when we're setting ourselves goals is, are we kind of thinking about a sense of kindness towards ourselves when we're setting a goal, or are we comparing ourselves to others? Are we thinking, oh, my friend goes to the gym 5 times a week, so why can't I do it? Your friend might have completely different circumstances to you. So it's kind of, where do you fit into the goal that you're setting? And is it something that if you don't achieve it, you can look and say, well,
Mm.
that doesn't make me a failure. I just need to maybe reevaluate
Yeah.
how I approach this.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I think we're in our society, time it's almost like time has become less and less. We've got less time, but
Yeah,
obviously that's something we create. So if we
yeah.
say to ourselves, and I do this as well, it's like, right, I'll have my to do list at the beginning of the week,
Mm,
and I've got so many, it's ridiculous. Like, how am I going to actually fit all that into
yeah,
7 days?
yeah,
So there's a thing. I haven't considered time
yeah,
out. Like, don't
yeah,
I need a day off? I
yeah,
haven't considered other things that might crop up.
yeah.
So you have to kind of have a backup plan,
Mm,
and just to, if
mm,
anything, it's almost like saying, well, I've got these 10 things to do.
yeah,
Tick them off as I'm going along. But the
yeah,
ones that aren't happening, is that because they're not urgent or necessary? So do
yeah,
you put those on and give yourself, well, I can do that in a month. These
yeah,
things need to be done in a week. This needs to be done in 2 weeks,
yeah,
a month. And even if it's something like 6 months to a year, if
yeah.
it's a big uh,
That's true,
change of
isn't it?
lifestyle, yeah,
Mm, so almost like, I guess that sounds really helpful in the way of, like your short-term goals, your mid-term goals, and your long-term goals. We can have, in fact, I was just, working with somebody earlier and we were talking about kind of goals and pressure and everything and the beliefs there that this client had. And we were just thinking, let's consider um whether or not you might be putting pressure on yourself here. And that's then kind of maintaining your your symptoms of low mood and anxiety. So, how can we change
yeah,
around a bit? We're not saying to lower standards. We're not saying, don't achieve your goals, but maybe we're saying, how do you do this in a way where you're also considering aspects of self-care and, other things that you might have going on. Right, that societal pressure, the pressure that we have, is huge
yeah,
at times, isn't
it
it?
is. Mm, that's it, absolutely.
Mm.
And I think sometimes it's hard to shut the noise out, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
to just think about
Mm.
the goals that you're setting for yourself and really just go in of
Yeah,
what's important to you, not what other people are thinking.
very
And
much.
I remember something that somebody said to me years ago.
Mm.
It really, really helped me. Or was it something I read? Well, I always do that. Something I heard or something I read. But basically
Yeah.
saying that nobody's interested. We think that people are
Yeah.
paying attention
Yeah.
and judging, but
Yeah.
actually everyone's so focused on what
Yeah.
they're doing themselves.
Very
So
much.
you might feel like, oh God, yeah, like
Mm.
I haven't done this, and
Yeah.
I'm not doing as well as the next person, but the next person is actually
Yeah.
focused on their goals, you know.
Definitely. And maybe they're not even, like I said, they're not even thinking, oh, Cleo didn't do that or she didn't do that. Like you said, it's your own personal kind of thing, isn't it? And that's actually really important as well. Sometimes we will just do something because we think we have to, like, 1st of January, New Year, New Me, New Start, all of that stuff. But really, can we make a new start at any point? Can we, come up with a helpful goal at any point in our lives, and it's a sense of achievement that comes with it as well, I guess, because if we achieve our goals, and this can be the tiniest thing, if someone really has struggles with their low mood, and I'll often say, if you got up and you went to the shop to get milk,
Mm,
and that was such a hard task for you, but you did it, you've achieved your goal. And that is what is brilliant because that was their personal goal, that's what you did. And it's great to be
mm.
proud of it.
Yeah, that's really, that's huge, really. It's like you're saying, it's a
Mm.
small thing, a small step, or we feel like
Yeah,
it's a small thing and a small step, but actually it's a huge
yeah,
step. And often we do forget to celebrate those wins and
yeah.
see them as, because equally, I suppose, when we're looking at New Year's resolutions,
Mm,
we look back. It's good to reflect, isn't it? And
absolutely.
I know definitely some years
Mm,
I've looked back and thought, I don't even remember what I've done. What did I do with the whole year? And I
yeah,
really have to sit there and rack my brain. But
yeah.
actually, if you when you really think about daily
Mm,
what you're doing and what you're achieving and
mm,
focusing on, a lot of the time it is the small wins, isn't it? It's the small
completely.
things that build. They're like little building blocks, aren't they, into big steps and big
Absolutely.
things.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, they're definitely building blocks, aren't they? Like if we are always looking for something bigger, we're never going to
Mm,
appreciate the tiny things that we might have done, which actually to us at certain points in our lives might not be tiny things, they might be huge things. And that, that's really important to celebrate.
mm-hmm. Absolutely, because so I suppose as well, going back to the gym idea.
Mm,
So I haven't done them yet. So that's one of my not resolutions. I'm similar to yourself because I don't. Uh, the only resolution I've ever had really in my life was to give up smoking, and I gave up in the summer
yeah,
of 2020. So
yeah,
it had nothing to do with a New Year's resolution. But for me, there's something that I've always thought about when
yeah,
I had gone through difficult times,
yeah.
and I kept thinking, and I think a lot of people do this as well, but you
Mm,
keep thinking, for instance, let's say it's a fitness goal, getting up
mm,
and moving more.
mm.
And I kept thinking, right, so I've got to get to, a yoga studio, for instance, and do an hour class. And
Yeah.
every time I couldn't, like, oh, God, I haven't got the energy, or I'm not feeling myself, I was
Mm,
beating myself up.
yeah,
But it's because even though an hour doesn't sound, it's not a lot of time really, but when you're feeling stuck, that feels like a huge mountain.
yeah.
And so I have this like idea or feeling that I used to say to myself, if I can just get up and do at
Mm,
home
mm,
10 minutes,
yeah,
10 minute stretch, 5 minute stretch, and then a breathing exercise.
yeah,
And then what I found would happen is I
yeah.
could do that,
Mm.
um, but I'd want to do more because once you get started, you're in that
Completely.
kind of
Yeah,
mode, aren't you?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I always think like if you just start with the smallest, and it might feel like, well, 5 minutes,
Mm,
but if you do 5 minutes, and if
mm.
you do 5 minutes for a month,
Yeah,
that 5 minutes is going to absolutely grow.
very
It
much
turns
so.
into more. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, because you're completely spot on there. We have to engage in that behavior first. If we don't engage in the behavior first, our feeling around it won't change. So the key is to
Oh,
to do. Yeah, completely. It, you didn't do
mhm,
the hour. That's okay. That's you did what you could do, and you got a sense of achievement and motivation from doing that, which then leads you on to,
mhm.
oh, I'm going to do it again. And that's that kind of thing that is important, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
what you said about reflection is really, um, to come back to that, reflection can be
Mm,
really valuable, can't it? To reflect on things. But I think also there is that element of what do we do with the reflection? Because is it a healthy
yeah.
reflection or is it a rumination? Because if it's a rumination, is it
Mm,
why questions? Because we can't change what we has happened in the past, but we can
mhm.
look at how can I do something different moving forward.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So So if you were looking back and thinking, so for that example,
Yeah.
so last year, let's say, for example, I set a resolution
Mm,
and I've just failed. The whole year has been, I haven't achieved the thing. So then if
mm,
you're looking back at that, yeah, you're
mm,
probably going to feel really bad and it might bring you down. Yeah, I see what you mean. Totally. So what would
yeah.
you say is the way to, like you're saying, when you're reflecting,
Mm,
what's the
mm,
attitude, if that's the right word, to look
yeah.
at the things that, let's say you're looking back and thinking, well, I didn't achieve that last year, but let me try this year.
Mm, mm.
How should you like approach that or look at that?
I think I'd be looking at what can I do now? What, what do
Mm,
I need now? And what am I going to do now that is going to help me? Because
yeah,
whatever we do, we can never change what has happened in the past,
yeah,
ever. But we can always look at, okay, well, I perhaps didn't do what I wanted to then, but I could do this differently now because that's kind of like a changing that mindset, that mind frame around it. It's, I'm going to go for this and I'm going to do this. I'm not going to ruminate and get caught up in that rumination because it's not doing anything for me.
mhm,
What can I do now?
yeah, yeah. So, um, looking at a situation or something that you feel like, and I wouldn't like to call it a failure anyway. It's just
Yeah,
time that passes, and
yeah.
obviously other stuff has gone on. So it's not failure, but
Mm,
something that a goal you set yourself,
yeah,
that you haven't achieved in the time that you wanted.
yeah.
Um, it, is it to approach it with a more healthy mindset, like saying to yourself,
Mm,
that's okay. I can move
yeah,
forwards,
yeah.
but not beating yourself up too much. Yeah,
That
yeah.
feels really important what you're saying there. It's okay. Failures are
Hmm.
part of life. We will all fail at things. It doesn't mean I am a failure is different to I failed at something. If we're kind of
Yeah,
like I am a failure, we're labeling ourselves, we're giving ourselves this really unhelpful label that probably isn't going to motivate us, probably isn't going to kind of cultivate any sense of compassion in ourselves to be able to do something
yeah,
differently. Going to do the complete opposite. So, yeah, okay, I failed that. Think about why that happened. Did I put too much pressure on myself? Did I have unrealistic expectations? Um,
mm,
what can I do to, as you said, coming back to those blocks, how can I build in these blocks
yeah,
to move forward with my goal, with my new goal, and reframing it?
yeah, yeah. So taking the big picture and just breaking it down, small steps that feel achievable. And I
Yeah.
suppose the good thing about that is every time you achieve one of those
Mm,
very small steps,
mm,
it's a win, and it sets you on that trajectory, doesn't it, to keep
yeah.
moving forwards. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's something really important there as well about rewarding ourselves, because do we often reward ourselves when we have achieved something, and or do we just not acknowledge it and move on to the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing? So we're not really acknowledging what we have achieved. So I'm wondering if there is something really important about, validating what we have achieved and rewarding ourselves.
Yeah, I love that because again, it's almost, if we're measuring ourselves
Mm,
against our neighbour or colleague or
mm,
friend, then
mm,
we're not going to notice what we're doing that's really deserves a pat on the back. Maybe other people might tell you, but it's what you feel
yeah.
really
Yes.
is something that you've achieved, isn't it?
Yes.
So yeah, I like the sound of that, to be able to yeah, reward yourself.
Yeah. And it
And,
doesn't have to
and
be major, does it? A major reward. You
no,
don't go out and buy yourself a really expensive gift, or, might just be I'm going to cook myself a nice meal, or I'm going to take, 30 minutes to do a creative activity, or,
mm,
whatever it might be. I guess some sort of acknowledgement. I took to work actually, a jar. last week.
Oh,
And this jar, it's called a happy jar, but you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's got a happy jar on there. And there's a
wow.
pencil in there, and there's a little pad of paper, only a tiny little pad. And I said to everyone, please feel free to write a little message in there, you know, positive quote, something motivating, something helpful, something that makes you smile or laugh, anything at all. Put it in the jar, fold it up, and then at the end of the year, we'll open that jar and we'll take
Oh,
all of those messages out and we'll reflect on those messages and have a look at them.
oh wow, that's huge, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because for a whole year, that's amazing. Because there's definitely going to be things that you'll have forgotten, and you probably won't.
absolutely.
Yeah, that won't stand out. But if you're looking back
Yeah,
and seeing those happy moments, yeah, I love that.
yeah. And
That's a
just
really good idea.
it's
Yeah.
nice, isn't it? And I think someone jokingly said, oh, can I put something about, I'm not happy with it? And I said, absolutely not. That's not going in that jar.
That doesn't go in there.
It's not
Only
going
the
in
happy
that jar.
bit. Oh,
We'll
no,
put that
absolutely. I
somewhere
love
else.
that. Because I used to write a diary. I journal on and
Yeah.
off now. But
Mm.
I remember being, especially as a young, like I'm talking about teenage years,
Mm.
and then when I would get into my 20s, I kept them all. I had lots of them. So
Yeah.
every now and again, I'd read back and I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, I remember that moment. It's
Mm.
a really nice thing to look back because, again, there might be things that, you feel, oh, that was a sad time. But overall, I always remember looking back and thinking, wow, look at the things I have achieved. It's like it's a
Yeah.
note from the past talking to you now.
Mm.
Yeah. And some of the similarities of thoughts and feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, the themes that you might have noticed, absolutely. Perhaps that's something we could come
Mm.
back to in another podcast, actually, thinking about writing
Yeah.
as therapy. We
Yeah.
could do that. That would be
Ah.
maybe a really powerful thing for us to think about because it's something that we often use in therapy. So yeah,
Ah, okay. And so that would be would that be something that you would advise that people do? Just write
absolutely.
down there. Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. It's just so powerful using writing. Not even just writing, drawing. Not everyone likes to write, so using kind of like drawing and pictures, painting, anything to help to
Mm.
yourself can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I would say, yeah, writing's definitely my one. I think that I find really therapeutic. But yeah, we'll have to. I've jotted that down now for
That
future
sounds
reference.
great.
Absolutely. But yeah, so if we're looking at this idea of um, we've got a big goal. So you're at home and you're thinking, I really want to. I'm just trying to think of an example. I don't know. I want to lose a stone for whatever reason. Could be for
Mm,
health or an occasion.
mm,
And you beat yourself up because, in fact, last year, for example, you didn't lose the weight you wanted to. In fact, you put it on. So now
mm,
you feel like you've got a bigger mountain to climb, so to speak. So
mm.
what we're saying really is take that as small steps. Break down the fact that it's a stone. Would you
Yeah.
say, and do that in like smaller chunks?
Yeah.
Would you say? And yeah.
And looking at the factors that, kind of contributing to that as well. Say, for example, if it is
Mm.
eating, often people will say things like, I'm going to cut this out or I'm going to cut that out. Is that really
Mm.
helpful for your goal? Because can you consistently actually do that? Or is it about making a kind of like more balanced choices or thinking about what you
Mm.
using things like mindful eating or whatever it might be, but you're considering, I guess, the circumstances, aren't you, and the factors that are all
Mm.
contributing to that goal. So as well as breaking it down and
Mm.
at the bigger picture of it, of can I maintain this in a way where I'm not denying myself enjoying things that I do like.
Yeah, yeah, because that's on the rock. I've seen. Um, that makes a lot of sense because I saw on TV, again, it's this time of year, so they do a lot of these advertisements. But there's
Mm,
one that says something about, wanting to lose weight or become fitter.
mm,
And is it actually about a particular type of food? So I don't know, like cake,
mm.
or is there somewhere that you can balance that out? And it's not necessarily just the cake. Maybe it's the fact that um, you're not getting out as much, you're not exercising as
Yeah,
much, or maybe it's some ingredient in the cake. But if it's a cream
yeah,
cake, maybe you could just change that to, I don't know, something that's got
yeah.
healthy icing or something like that.
That's right. That's exactly what it is, isn't it? Though it's looking at kind of modifying it because if we say to ourselves, okay, say if you really like chocolate, for example, and you say to
Mm,
yourself, I'm going to cut chocolate out, okay? You haven't really thought about the impact that this is going to have because you really, really enjoy it, and you're saying, I'm going to cut this out.
mm,
Okay? What will most likely happen is you might be able to cut it out for a few days, but then when you do have a chocolate, you'll binge on it. So that's what we'll generally do.
yeah,
So it's kind of like that's that long-term effect as well that kind of cutting something out has. So it's kind of like, and okay, if we do eat the chocolate, what's so bad about that? Has the world ended?
yeah,
It's okay. We can go back, we can
yeah,
reevaluate, we can think about what do we need to do now that might be helpful. And like you said, making those small changes. So not denying ourselves things that we do like and enjoy.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And again, maybe it's like you're saying, it's a good idea, like you say, to look at the big picture, not just look at and think, this
Yeah.
is the goal. I failed the goal, and you keep
Mm,
going for this. It's going to be really hard if you're not looking at the situation around it, the bigger picture,
yeah.
because there could be so much more behind that,
Mm,
especially where it comes to your, I don't know, like we say, there's a relationship that we have with food, or a relationship we
definitely.
have with
Mm,
exercise,
mm,
and how we think about these things.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's key, isn't it? Because that's also,
mm,
I guess, part of what you're saying. There's also that relationship we have with ourselves. How do we view
yeah,
ourselves, when we don't do what we think we should have done? Or, we've broken one of our rules. Um, and we kind of touched upon the rules, didn't we, in the last podcast? And
mm,
it's like
yeah,
that
yeah,
as well, because that can have a huge impact on um goals as well, and how we view ourselves if we don't achieve those goals.
mm, mm. It's so true because kind of what springs to mind is the idea that you're telling. I think we did in the last podcast as well
Mm.
mention this thing of the internal conversations we're having, the narrative that we're,
Yeah,
constantly is going on. Oh, you're an
yeah,
idiot, and you've done that wrong, and look at you
yeah,
failing, and we put ourselves down, and we don't
very
do
much.
that to other people. We treat
Absolutely.
ourselves so badly.
Yeah, it's that excessive
Yeah.
self-criticism that we have, isn't it? That we will be so quick to criticize ourselves, but we won't be quick to recognize our achievements.
Yeah.
Generally, we'll put ourselves down and we'll say, like you said, oh, I'm an idiot because I didn't do that, or I'm stupid, or whatever it is, labels that we'll put on ourselves.
Mm,
But we won't think about when we did achieve that goal, or when we did do something that we made us smile, however small it might have been.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you said something as well in the last one. I'm just remembering that that is a natural. It's a human. I can't remember what you called it. Sorry, there was something where you said that the negative talk or the negative thoughts are kind of where we will go naturally first. It's something we have to.
Yeah,
Is that right? If I remember that correctly.
Yeah, it's our threat. We have threat-based brains. As human beings, we have threat-based brains. So our brains are designed to pick up on threats in the environment. And in terms of negative thinking patterns, negative thoughts, Absolutely. We all have them. It's
Yeah.
part of what happens. We cannot stop those thoughts coming into our minds. But what we can do is we can choose how we react to them differently. Um,
Mm,
and that's, I guess, the key, isn't it? I'm having this thought. It's okay to have that thought. What's a helpful way of thinking about this? An
yeah.
alternative way.
Yeah. Yeah. Just kind of change that in a conversation that we're having with ourselves,
Yeah,
or
very
pay
much.
attention to it, be aware.
Yeah, completely being
Mm,
aware, being mindful of it. And I guess I personally tend to steer away from the term positive thinking. I tend to kind of look at balanced thinking or helpful thinking or compassionate thinking, because positive thinking feels quite patronizing at times. When somebody might be going
mm,
through a really difficult time and you say to them, think positively, you know, what
yeah.
are they
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah. It's not helpful. Wonderful.
I tried to, of course it's helpful to think positively, but we can't always think positively. Um, because it just doesn't work that way, does it?
Yeah. Yeah. Because even, I suppose the thing that came to mind then, about how other people might react to how you're feeling, is something like bereavement or grief.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember people saying to me like, "Oh," and everyone's trying to be helpful when they know you're going through that kind of pain, but
yeah.
saying, "Oh, they're in a better place," and
Mm,
they're,
mm,
all these things you do know, and all our lives really we're kind of prepared, or we understand, we
mm,
think we understand about death and the process, but until it happens, you don't know how that's really gonna
yeah,
affect you. And
yeah,
sometimes you might feel like you're dealing with it really well.
yeah.
Um, but like you say, it's just, I suppose it's about, not about trying to wash that down with happiness or cover that with
That's
happiness at
it.
all, because you can't. It's about
Yeah,
finding ways that you're not pushing yourself down, I suppose. Is that the right kind of idea? Or
definitely. Yeah, and maybe not putting pressure on yourself of you have to deal with it in a certain way. Because, say, for example, grief,
mm,
there is not a time limit. There's no right or wrong way of dealing with it. It will come in waves, there's all sorts of therapy models about grief and everything, but the thing is,
mm,
things, and we are all going to experience things differently, depending on the relationships we had with the people that we have lost, or all of that will impact hugely, and maybe that's where it's really helpful to say it's all right if I'm having a moment where I'm really
mm,
stressed. It's okay to have that.
yeah. And yeah, and just the idea that the positive, that's nothing, it's got nothing to do with being positive or thinking positively. Just
Mm,
allowing, I
mm.
suppose, those thoughts and feelings to take place and go through it, rather
Yeah,
than trying avoiding it.
very much, yeah, and perhaps sometimes the avoidance is okay as well, because there might
Oh,
be
okay.
might be that we need that avoidance, because if we got consumed by any emotion, that would be so difficult, wouldn't it? And
Yeah.
perhaps there's times where we may need to avoid, you know,
Mm,
um, and maybe that's okay, if it helps us.
mm,
Time. I guess would just be such a personal thing, won't it, for everybody really with grief. I guess what I do
mm.
when I'm working with grief, though, your reaction to whatever is going on is completely okay and natural. That
Okay.
is,
Yeah.
it's all in however you're feeling, let's just validate that.
Mhm, mhm. And so, really, then, how we should look at that is, no matter what, again, don't beat yourself up, but no matter what,
Mm.
everything that you're thinking and feeling is fine and it's okay. And
Yeah.
there's no,
Mm,
like you say, time limit or
mm,
way, just your
mm.
individual personal way of dealing with things.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think
Do you
perhaps
feel?
people sometimes come out with the cliches because they don't know what else to say. And I think it's one of those things, isn't it? In society, we don't talk about death a lot, do we really? We don't talk about it much. Sometimes it's a bit of a taboo subject, and people just don't know what to say. They're trying to be as kind and helpful as they can, but sometimes it's okay to just not
It
say
feels
much.
yeah, exactly. Like you say, it's one of those things where everything, whatever, however you're dealing with it, however you're gonna,
Mm,
it's okay
yeah.
because it is such a huge thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, lovely. And with CBT, would
Yeah.
it be so? And I don't know if this is the right way to think about it. So,
Mm,
say it was something like you had some CBT treatment for bereavement, and then you've gone past that, and then I don't know, a few years down the line, you're going through really not chronic stress and anxiety.
yeah.
Could you go back to those techniques and things that you've used in CBT for your
Yeah.
grief or bereavement for stress and anxiety, or is it a different way of, dealing with things? Like,
Yeah,
could you use the tips and techniques in different areas or times of your life for different difficulties?
yeah, I think it would be kind of looking at kind of like what's kind of going on at that point in your life. I guess with bereavement, CBT is probably, I would probably, look at counseling because grief, is CBT. Challenging thoughts and behaviors wouldn't be something that we do with grief. As a counselor, I'd be looking at it from a counseling point of view, giving people that chance to talk things through, you know,
Yeah.
um, because their reactions are completely rational, they're not irrational. And I guess if we think
Mm,
kind of like CBT techniques to help reduce stress or like negative thought patterns, we might be thinking about, what's happening in this situation, what are the external circumstances, what's going on in the environment, what's your day-to-day life like, what's happening, kind of evaluating that, thinking about kind of the triggers as well, maybe, for the stress,
yeah.
the anxiety, keeping a journal, like you said about keeping a journal. I often say to people,
Yeah.
keep a journal because often in the first session, of CBT, I'll set a out of session task for people to do a mood diary. So we can see
Yeah.
what the mood is like over the period of a week. And in the mood diary, I'd be looking for kind of three kind of things. So obviously date and time. Then I'd be looking at what's your mood, try to tell me what the actual emotion is. So steering away from terms like depressed, because it's not a feeling,
Mm,
are you feeling sad? Are you feeling happy?
oh,
Are you excited? Are you
yeah.
angry? And let's rate that on a scale of 0%, how intense is that emotion? So if it's 100%, it's really intense. If it's zero, it's not really there at all. Let's rate it. And then a bit of context of what was going on, what was happening, um,
Mm,
what we're thinking about, what was the situation like, who were you with? Um, and that gives us a really, really good idea of any sort of like patterns or themes that might be arising as well throughout the week that might be
well,
contributing to any sort of anxiety or
mm,
stress.
that's a really that makes so much sense. Um, to be able to, because again, I suppose it's the thing of being able to look back and
Hmm.
pick up the common denominators, and it only
Yeah,
makes it straightforward when you kind of look at it in that way.
yeah, because
Um,
we're getting it out of our minds as
mm,
well, aren't we? We're putting it on paper.
yeah.
Then what contributes to a lot of stress and anxiety type symptoms is we've got loads going around in our minds. We've got so much that's kind of like going on in our minds. And if we kind of think about like the
Mm,
worry model or the anxiety model, what we'll often have is a trigger. So that trigger will
Yeah.
be, an external trigger, so something happening in the environment, or it might be an
Mhm.
internal trigger, like say a physical sensation. And then what will happen is we'll have the process of what we call worry. So that's the what if. So what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever? And then we'll have a
Yeah.
physical response, which is anxiety. So people often get the two confused with, worry and anxiety, but they're two different things because worry is your thought process, what's going on in your mind, and anxiety is your physical
Mm,
response to that. Then at the end of that cycle, because it's so exhausting, we'll become kind of exhausted and demoralized because we're going around in that cycle all the time. So sometimes just understanding our cycles, of what's contributing to the worry can be really helpful.
mm,
Think about how we can break this, what we're going to do. And part of it is about responding rather than reacting because reaction's so quick, isn't it? Whereas a response,
yeah. Yeah.
you need to slow down to give a response often. Um,
Mm,
have a little bit of thinking time before we respond as opposed to reacting.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That does. Yeah. And I suppose like initially that's going to be something that's going to feel really hard to do because you're not used to doing it. But the more you become aware, the
Yeah,
more you will slow down, I suppose, and be able
that's
to
it.
choose how you respond rather than react.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. And we'll use kind of what we call thought records in CBT to help us to think about, okay, let's pick a situation in which you were struggling with your thoughts. Let's identify what your main and helpful thoughts were. We can call them the hot thoughts. What were the main thoughts? Then we can look at, okay, how could we respond to these thoughts differently? So we're trying to challenge that way of thinking, because imagine if we acted on every thought that we had, the world would be chaos.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would be complete
Yeah.
chaos, wouldn't it?
Mm, so true. So we're already kind of filtering in
Mm.
some way anyway, aren't we? I suppose
Yeah.
it's just being um, making that being aware of it, like saying, being mindful of it,
Mm.
and making that bigger then, to not just the natural filters that are happening, but bigger to think, oh, actually, I don't have to react to this at all. I can
Yeah,
take a step back and think of
definitely.
how, yeah, what's best for me. You said something there as well. You said you don't say depression, did you say? Like, don't
Mm.
describe your mood as depressed? Is
Yeah,
that what you said?
it is. Depression is such a blanket term, isn't it? It's such a, what does depression mean? Depression isn't a feeling, it's a it's a real umbrella term because underneath depression there
Oh,
can be so many feelings like sadness or hurt or rejection or anger or frustration or irritation. So often looking at kind of like trying to understand someone's emotions, I'd like them to be able to use the word to describe it. And again, this can be really difficult for people depending on their upbringing. Have they talked about feelings? If they haven't, they're not going to know how to describe their feelings. So I'll often give like a wheel of emotions. There's got lots of different emotions on there that, clients can pick out what they're feeling when they're completing a journal or a mood diary. Um, to notice the physical sensation when you might be feeling sad, what's happening in your body, where can you feel it, what can you notice, what changes. So there's so many different cues, but yeah, generally I'd want to try to understand what depressed means to somebody when they're telling me they're depressed.
yeah, because I've never actually heard anybody describe it that way. I'm really like, okay, because and maybe a lot of people. don't, because I think it's
Mm,
something that is it's a word that's bandied around,
very much, yeah.
and it kind of, we just say, yeah, I'm feeling depressed, or
Yeah.
I am depressed, or I'm going through depression.
Yeah.
I noticed as well that
Mm,
uh, doctors, I don't know if it was a term that they used before, but they use more the
mm,
term now low mood
yeah.
to describe, but then they'll say, oh, but it's depression.
Yeah.
And then I suppose if we don't understand what
Mm,
really, because I'm sure a lot of people would think, well, I thought depression was the, like diagnosis,
mm,
or, the explanation. But what you're saying obviously
yeah.
makes so much more sense, because,
Mm,
like you say, you can be
mm,
depressed from all sorts of things. What's
completely.
actually going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What's leading to that? Depression might be the diagnosis. What actually is it?
Mm,
Does that mean to you? Like, what is leading? What are the factors that are contributing to you feeling low in mood or depressed? And, you know,
mm,
what happens in your body? What goes through your mind? What are your physical symptoms? What are your behaviors, which we'd often plan out in CBT and map out? We call that a five aspects model. So what the trigger is,
oh, okay.
the situation.
Hmm.
People can use this, it's a really, really good way of thinking about it. Try to know what
Yeah,
that situation is, then your main unhelpful thoughts, then you'd be putting down your feelings. So, anger, frustration, happy, whatever it is. Then your behaviors. So, what you did or didn't do. Did you struggle to eat? Did you struggle to sleep? Did you withdraw from people? Did you not leave the house? Did you stop answering the phone? Then what was happening in your body?
yeah.
And all of those things, you have there a cycle. And CBT would be about breaking those cycles. So, how can we challenge the thought, the behaviors, which will then impact on that whole cycle?
Wow, wow, that's so big, because I just feel like I've learned so much. Because again, I've always thought, and I think a lot of people when I speak, also I've
Mm,
gone through depression, and
mm,
it is just it's a big box,
yeah,
isn't it? That's got so many things. It can mean so
yeah,
many different things to different people. Yeah, yeah. Whether it's,
absolutely.
I know, a breakable relationship,
Mm,
grief, feeling stuck,
yeah,
so many different things. Yeah.
that's it, isn't
Wow.
it? Like you said, the stuck as well. Sometimes people, as human beings, we don't always know how to express how we're feeling. We don't always know what we're feeling. And it's like trying to understand, for me as a therapist, I really want to try and
Mm,
understand what it's like for my client in their world. You know,
yeah.
what is it like for you? What happens when you have these thoughts, and what and will it's interesting because people will describe things in such different ways. Sometimes I might ask somebody, what's going through your mind, what are you thinking? And they'll tell me what's happening in their body, or they'll tell me what they did, or others,
Oh,
yeah, I'll ask about what's happening in your body, I was thinking this, or I was angry. And kind of that model, that thoughts, the behaviors, the physical symptoms, and the emotions, it really helps us to understand how, where are they all going, and the cycles that form.
yeah. No, that's really interesting as well, because another thing you said was, how does it feel in your body?
Yeah,
And I suppose that's becoming more and more
yeah.
prevalent as well. The idea that
Mm,
um,
mm,
thoughts can manifest in our bodies. Because one of
yeah,
the techniques that I taught myself through yoga, like if I'm feeling really stressed and emotional,
yeah.
it's actually an acupressure point. So I actually put
Uh,
pressure between my thumb and my finger,
oh,
and just
okay.
take really deep breaths, because there's like a little gap there. I can't remember the number of this acupressure point, but I
Oh,
found that
okay.
if I put pressure there, if I feel like I'm gonna, well, when I was going through difficult times,
Yeah.
I'd just burst into tears, and I think it's a lot to do with menopause as well, feeling really emotional,
Mm,
and um, obviously you don't want to be, if you're at home you can have a good cry, you know, that's fine. But if I was out and about and I think I'm
Yeah.
sitting on, I don't know, on the bus, or I feel like I'm just going to cry and I feel embarrassed. So
Mm.
not to block it or stop it, just to get through
Yeah.
it, I would do that, take deep breaths. And it really, I
Yeah.
found it really, really helped.
That sounds
And so
really
for me, that was the thing
exciting.
of,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, because I realised that obviously there's something
Mm.
going on when I do that, or maybe it's
Yeah.
just because I've seen that people do things like they'll tie string around the
Yeah.
wrist and they'll
Yeah.
twist it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just that you're taking your attention off the thing
Yeah.
and doing something else and saying this is helping, and you get into that mode. So you're actually creating the thing, really. It
Yeah,
could
very much
be,
so.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's almost what you're describing now is what we kind of call grounding, because grounding, and you use this a lot in PTSD work as well, when I'm working with children,
Mm.
um, is kind of how do we, if someone's having a flashback or a nightmare, how can we ground ourselves? How can we bring ourselves back to the here and the now? So, that sounds like a really good technique there to use. And also stone, like I give my clients, face-to-face clients that I see, I'll often give them a stone if we're doing any sort of
Oh,
work, and that's so they can pick which one they want, whichever one they're drawn to, can use that as a grounding object. Um,
wow.
yeah, it's kind of bringing you back to where you are now, and also sometimes creating an image of a calm place or a safe place in your mind. So when you do feel stressed or anxious, you're able to just close your eyes, and you're able to visualize this calm
Mm.
place in your mind.
Oh, I like that as well. Because, yeah, it takes you away from what the current
Yeah.
emotion might be, or feeling,
Mm,
and brings you back to a place of calm, which can help you, I suppose, look at things differently. It's like having a fresh light on it instead of being wrapped
yeah.
up and underneath it. You kind of looking at it from a different perspective, I suppose. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's because they say that, don't they? That certain emotions that build up over time
Mm,
can, like for instance, headaches. Like if
yeah.
you're worried about something, stressed out about something, you're anxious about something,
Yeah.
then you start to get a headache in a particular place.
Yeah.
You might think that that's a separate thing. I can take tablets for that, but actually, if you deal with
Mm,
the underlying um, cause, I suppose, if you can match the things together and know that it's because of that.
completely.
Mm.
That's so important, isn't it? It's like, our mental health and our physical health are not two separate things. They're part of us as one being, aren't they?
Mm.
We can't ignore
Yeah,
one thing
yeah,
and just work on the other. We have to think about
yeah.
how those things kind of fit as part of us as well as a person.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Like the
Mm.
holistic, we were saying this in the
Yeah.
last podcast as well, but it's a beautiful thing to come to a place where we know that these things are, if we know that in ourselves as individuals,
Mm.
not to say that we're curing ourselves, but definitely that prevention, we can probably prevent things getting to a bad stage or a
Yeah.
worse stage if we know how to, we know what's going on first of all, and know how to deal with it, I suppose. Mm.
Definitely, because we can then also see triggers, can't we? You will look at, I'll often work with long-term health conditions, and the impact of that on mental health. And, I'll be asking people to look at things like doing diaries to notice, when do you notice a flare-up of your symptoms, or that your pain is worse? How would you rate your pain at different times? Because
Yeah,
that is kind of that link there between your thoughts and what's happening in your body physically as well is very much there. We just need to try and figure out how it's fitting together, and what's making it worse, what's making it better, as well. So yeah,
yeah,
the holistic approach is key, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it feels like such a, just even speaking to you, like it's giving me positive triggers of things, you know, I always describe it as a toolbox that we can have, that
Yeah,
we can carry around these different things. So, you know, how we're talking to ourselves, how our bodies feel,
yeah.
the food we eat, the fresh air that we're breathing, or exercise. And if we always know that actually, oh, I'm feeling this way,
Mm,
instead of that becoming a big kind of
mm,
cloud, that you
yeah,
can kind of, it'll still be there, but you can, there's ways to
yeah.
maneuver yourself through it, kind of thing. Mm.
Absolutely. You know, we can't sometimes get rid of it, can we? We can't get rid of a
No.
long-term health condition, but we can look at,
Mm.
can we manage it differently, or how can we think about the impact that it's having on your mental health as well? And, you know, are you doing something that might be, um, often I'll find this with chronic pain is, you know, I have people that will report, you know, I was in bed for a couple of days, but then on day three I felt great. So I got up and I did loads and in bed again for 2 days because they're just not paced and they've not kind of like they thought about the limitations and self-care within they were doing, and how that long-term health condition kind of fitted into that as well. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It does. It really, really does. And I think we've had some great, you know, I've made these notes here, definitely about the journaling and the happy jar. I like that because maybe you could, if it's not an actual jar, maybe it's a happy book that you
yeah,
can put your little notes down
absolutely.
there, or post-its.
Yeah,
So I'm going to pop those in their show notes for sure,
yeah,
and the mood diary, because I think
definitely.
those will be really helpful and
Yeah,
impactful. And maybe this time next year, people will be looking back at their happy jar, or
yeah.
happy book, and can kind of take stock. Yeah,
Absolutely, that'd be
fantastic.
great, wouldn't it, to reflect on that and help you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, it's been fantastic, Sheena. Lovely
Good,
speaking with
it's been
you.
great.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of compassionate serenity. Remember, resolutions don't have to be perfect, they just need to reflect your unique journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who might need a little inspiration this new year. Also, if you have questions or things that you'd like to ask Sheena, please drop us an email or contact us on social media. It would be lovely to hear from you. Until next time, take care of yourself and embrace your own compassionate serenity. Bye for now.